Bob Christopher was CEO of the company that made Pleo, the robot dinosaur, one of the first successful consumer robotics products. Greg Appelhof is the CEO of TRG, a global retail company specializing in emerging technologies. Together they've written a paper, The 2-Year Itch, advising hardware and robotics companies on how to survive in the retail market. Welcome to the Robot Startup series, Bob. Would you like to share some more of the Pleo story and how you came to work with Greg?
Sure. So Greg Appelhof and I met with Caleb Chung at CES in 2004. Caleb and I met earlier in 2004, and he shared his invention with me, and it was a very kind of interesting story. I'll go back a little bit here. So Caleb showed a video of a wired up robot that was moving lifelike in a way that I never saw before. And so it was this inspiration that kind of created the opportunity around Ugobe. And Caleb and I then created this idea about, a platform that would bring lifelike robots into the world. And so we had this big idea. We thought we'd go out to CES and see if retailers would want to buy the product. And so we did a little bit of guerrilla marketing. So one of the things we did was we stood out just outside the Wowie booth. And Wowie had just launched the RoboSapien, which is still a pretty popular toy. And we stood around the booth, and we met a bunch of buyers from retailers, including Radio Shack. And so we renegated the relationships and told them who we are, who Caleb is, what we're doing. And all of a sudden, we got a bunch of business cards from retailers. And in that process, we met Greg Appelhof, who was there as well. And he is the president of TRG. So Greg's company represents Harman Kardon, Griffin Technologies, Pleo, and other leading device products into the consumer retail space. He's in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so he's right at the headquarters of Best Buy and Target, and within the, the retail realm, as I call it. And he's also an entrepreneurial person by nature. So we connected, and he told us about the success of RoboSapien and Wowie in retail, and how they were just completely opening up this new channel, right? So Craig was really encouraging us to bring out our product into the marketplace, and we were calling it at the time the lifelike robot. We didn't really have the name Pleo figured out, so we had this video we had this really cool video we had on a laptop, and we were like stealthily open the laptop up and we'd show people, hey, look at this, and like, wow, what is this? This is really cool. And then we also had the bag, or the box, I should say, with the prototype in it. It was basically just the working prototype. So we kind of renegade people over to this side and into a hotel room if we could, and show them the prototype working. Or it was very guerrilla, and it was, but it was classic because we realized when talking to people from Radio Shack and Best Buy at CES that there was really this huge appetite for interactive products, especially robots. So that kind of really launched us into the direction, and Greg was there from the very beginning, and shepherded us along, and into the process of building Pleo and the company, and then launching it into retail. So there's a lot of stories I can tell, but the interesting fact I'd like to communicate to people is it's really good to talk to your distributor partners before you even launch your product, and understand what they're looking for, even if it's online or if it's in a retail location, or if you're selling a product, let's say not retail, into some, let's say, corporate channel. That feedback loop is so important to positioning your product and building it. So it was a lot of fun.
So you're saying customer development really extends to understanding all of your market channel.
Exactly. Well, I mean, kind of this enveloping our discussion into the two-year itch, one of the there's a part of the two-year itch that's about the innovator's dilemma, which is when you build a company, you're no longer you're no longer a sole practitioner. You're no longer yourself creating some really cool product and idea. You have people around you that are other stakeholders, and in the process of including your board of directors, your investors, and your distributor partners, and so on, it's easy to get lost in the process of building something that everyone wants, everyone likes. In other words, I call it death by committee. You start to lose your innovative edge because now you have to make everyone happy. And so there's a really interesting paradox we came across when we we developed Ugobe and Pleo, which was we didn't want to water down innovation, but we had to also be respectful of people's opinions and ideas, including our partners. We had one of our consultants was he was the VP of operations at Apple. So he worked for John Sculley. He built operations in pretty much a big job, right? So he brought along a lot of the Apple thinking for how do you build products and innovation. And we, it was a little bit too much for us to kind of synthesize in a small startup company. So we took the lessons from Apple and the lessons from Leapfrog and Lucasfilms, because one of our board directors was the president of Lucasfilms. So we got kind of the industrial light and magic ILM input as well. And from Blizzard, we had people from Blizzard and so on and so forth. So we had a lot of really cool people with great backgrounds in building great products. But we had to be like, okay, this is a little bit too much. Let's synthesize it down to something that we really understand. And what it came down to is really, what are our core tenets? What are our core values as a company and what we believe in? So really the guideposts for making decisions about innovation, about your product. And it sounds simple, but it's really difficult to write. And so we had 5 or 6 guideposts that, we had them on, we'd write them on the whiteboard and we'd talk about them all the time. And of course, right now, I'm forgetting them. But it was like religion to us. And so every product feature, engineering innovation, and so on and so forth would be scrutinized or at least reviewed in comparison to our we called them the founding principles of life form OS, which is what our platform was called. So anybody who's out there building a product beyond them, that's a team of people, raise money, build a company, you have to be careful about what you really want to base your decisions on. And in this case, I say it's your core tenets. And you shouldn't have more than 10. In fact, 10 is probably too many. You should have 5 or more, really your core principles. So we learned that, and then we would use that in terms of our decision process at Ugobe. So it was very interesting for us to do that. When we became very good at that. And so we had other life forms beyond Pleo that no one ever saw that were amazing products that fit the same criteria that Pleo did. So we had this kind of Apple-esque, like, let's keep everything somewhat the same but different. And unfortunately, we never had a chance to launch those products. One is called Toby, which is basically iBot spelled backwards. And Toby is a desktop video conferencing robot that would interact with your Skype camera and other voice over IP applications on your computer. And it had a little personality. It was really a wonderful product. And our friends at Foxconn prototyped it for us, and they literally fell in love with it because it was one of those products that we thought, everybody beyond a kid is going to love it. But it felt right because it met the core principles of our innovation and our company. I remember one of the core principles we had was if you could characterize, if you could look at Ugobe and give it like a personality profile. So what's the personality of, whatever, who we are. So one of the one of the characteristics was being open and transparent and being very, just honest with our faults. So we would communicate things like our paint is flaking off the skin, as we're having problems in manufacturing, or Pleo's battery life is only so long. Please understand the limitations of battery technology and blah blah blah. And so we put that out there in the Pleo world, and we really built goodwill among our customer base, and people forgave us for these things. So being open and transparent was a big thing. So the personality characteristic was, let's be like that, I don't know what to call it, that hippie effect, like just being open and kind of share the peace and the love with what Ugobe is all about. We're trying to basically the old Apple computer from the very beginning when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were, much more liberal and free-thinking and open with their company. We wanted that same kind of vibe for Ugobe. So we had that approach. It's one of our core tenets, and it worked out quite well for us because we built a lot of following on the community and a lot of really, really great loyal customers who just loved our products. So one of those things I'd say is make sure you build strong dialogue with your customer. Be open with them. Don't try to hide your problems and challenges.
You use the term the two-year itch to describe the pressures that retail sales puts on companies. Could you elaborate?
Well, yeah, sure. And I want to frame the two-year itch in not so much a negative retail viewpoint. It's about the responsibilities of building a consumer hardware company, and how do you match your needs with the needs of the marketplace. In this case, consumers, but really your retailers are your partners, right? Either online retailers and physical retailers are your partners. But retail is a very interesting animal. You have to be very careful about how you sell through retail. And so what I say in the two-year itch is really what we learned at Ugobe was your business model of a consumer hardware company is really built on the bookends of manufacturing on one side, which is your cost center, and retail on the revenue side, which is revenue center. Those are your bookends of your business model. And so they're dynamically connected through a various relationships. So you can imagine you have to build forecasts with retail to then talk to your manufacturing partners. And we became very good at that in talking to our manufacturing groups. We used Jetta and also Foxconn as our manufacturers, and that's a whole different story because we had to manage two manufacturers, which meant we had to have two groups of engineering teams on the ground in China, because they would not let our engineering groups talk to each other because they didn't want to share secrets back and forth between the Longhua campus at Foxconn to the Panyu campus at Jetta. So they just wanted this very interesting, difficult thing for us to manage. But we realized that the bookends are really retail again and manufacturing. And so the two-year itch is really about how do you synthesize your company so that you can succeed. So in other words, how do you not get retail, how do you avoid retail hiccups and big challenges that you can succeed? And so Greg and I, of course, Greg is from the retail world, but he also understands manufacturing and distribution and logistics and so on and so forth. But we like to characterize the idea that really your company's about selling product and making revenue, so you have to think about the market-facing relationship you're building on the retail side. But the issue that we came up with, and I think the failure of Ugobe, I wanted to make sure that I clarify that with Ugobe. we were succeeding. The problem towards the end of our company is we became very aggressive in our forecasts in retail. We really put it out there. And we also had the issue of our distributors and retail partners when the financial world crisis came around. Everyone's purse strings, everyone's float became really, became strict, became very weakened. And so we couldn't rely on cash up front deposits. We couldn't rely on letters of credit that would have very favorable terms to us. And so that shrunk our ability to float the operation of the company, and hence by that time we had to raise more money. If we had really managed the bookends better from the retail side to the manufacturing side, I'm almost going to guarantee you Ugobe would be here today. We would have not had that issue. And it was such a travesty because we had a forecast that was well over $50 million in revenue by 2010. We were doing 19.8 million our first full year in revenue and we couldn't keep pace with the demand. It wasn't the fact that demand wasn't there for us. We just couldn't float the inventory to meet demand, and therein lies the challenge. You have to learn how to pull back from demand and understand how to float your company, or in this case, pay for your product and pay for your company. And so there's a lot of things in between those two bookends, complexities that you need to know about to fine-tune your business model. So that's why I wrote this white paper, which is really the lesson I learned at Ugobe and also the lessons I've learned advising companies in the last 3 or 4 years and watching other companies and their challenges. And there's a methodology. I like to kind of break things down into a process and a logical format. And the pattern emerged at Ugobe that there's a logical way of managing all this. It was such a busy time for us. It was hard for us to kind of really step back and look at everything because we're in the middle of it all the time. So what the 2-year is about is it's really 7 core principles you have to be careful about and watch and manage so that you can succeed and really not let yourself obviously financially struggle or in this case fail as a company. The 2-year itch is all about 2 years, and so the idea is that it takes you 2 years in sales to synthesize your bookends, in this case your manufacturing and your retail side. So operations to finance to product design, innovation, to brand development, to customer support logistics, to media, PR, marketing, and all the things you need to do to push your message out into the world. It takes you 2 years to really get that right. In 2 years of revenue, not 2 years of we're building something, we're not in the market yet. I mean, I would assume by the time you hit your first revenue year, you're already a 2 to 3 year old company. So it's not how old you are as a company, it's how many years you are in the market in selling a product and supporting it. So the 2 year itch is that really, once you get past the 2 year mark on retail in selling your product, you're able to really understand the dynamics and fine-tune them. It's not going to be smooth, but you're going to have a way to really manage your costs and leverage your revenues. That's what it's all about, really, is managing your costs and leveraging revenue. And you know, that sounds like a pretty interesting tagline, but it's a lot more than that. Yeah, so it's the fundamental principles of building a hardware company. So, an example, you know, venture capitalists and investors will say, I don't want to fund a hardware company. It's too much risky. You'll hear Paul Graham from Y Combinator say that. I was literally sitting next to Trevor Blackwell, who's the founder of Anybots, and I hear Paul say to him, Trevor, you know, I would never fund a hardware company. Well, what are you doing? And, you know,
Well,
or Trevor to deal with this internal pressure of, well, that's what I'm doing, right? So,
Paul Graham has eaten his words. He's pushed forward double robotics, and he's put down an open invitation to all hardware companies to apply to Y Combinator.
That's great. That's great. No, it's wonderful to see that. I still think he's a little bit, and everyone's a little bit hesitant because they don't really, it's much more a risk. So, right, if you invest in a company that's hardware-based and they get it wrong, it's hard to start over again with hardware because you have to either sell it, scrap it, or change it. And software code's a lot easier to change. There's no inventory issues. There's no sunken cost in cost of goods besides people time. So, yeah, there's. So, Andra, what's interesting is then how do you box? How do you frame risk around a hardware company? How do you make it so that, you know, the answers are right there? This is what you need to do to succeed in manufacturing, distribution, and logistics. This is what you need to do to succeed in retail. Positioning, pricing, blah, blah, blah. And the more we talk about that and the model that supports that, the more I'm convinced that the investor world will be more supportive and interested in hardware companies. It's just that it's not their job to be an industry analyst in hardware. They don't need to go out and do homework and figure out why does Apple succeed and somebody else doesn't succeed in terms of physical products. It's your job to help educate them, but in a very quick, fast way, but with some guiding principles. You have to have a methodology that says, this is how I'm going to succeed. And I mean, this is how I'm going to at least mitigate risk. So you'll hear a lot of these really cool innovation, great product companies, robot companies included. They're coming to market on Kickstarter right now and elsewhere, where they're approached by, distributors and by manufacturers and by retail partners with different potential offers. They'll say, let me white label your product, or let me license your technology, right? So, and it's a very important decision to make, because we had the same issue. We were approached by Mattel and Spin Master and big companies like that who wanted to license the Pleo technology and put their own version of it out there. It's a challenge because you have to say it's either you're building a product and a brand that's your own, or you're basically an innovation shop that's licensing out design models to people like Hasbro or Mattel, or to to somebody else out there in the world. Let's say iRobot is an example. Little footnote, by the way, iRobot, Colin, who is the co-founder and CEO of iRobot, towards the end of our company, he really wanted to buy Ugobe and Pleo. He wanted to be in the iRobot company, and he just couldn't convince his board of directors to do it. But he was really there. So there's as a company, you're going to find opportunities to sell your product and finance it and so on, and then you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do in terms of a company model? And then, of course, if you build your own product and your own brand, then how do you do it? How do you build that company? And then how do you scale it? So one of the challenges that I think is very interesting for robot companies is really, how do you define a category that's still embryonic? It's still being developed as we speak, and there's a bit of the kind of the cat and mouse in terms of building products and innovation in robotics. In other words, what is working today, what people like to see at certain price points, battle bots to interesting robots that walk around and do things. There are certain things that are beginning to be interesting. Example is the one that I'm just forgetting the name. The company received $15 million from Sequoia. It's the iPhone or Android little robot that's has tractor wheels on it.
Remotive.
Remote. Right. You know, you could say, well, robots and iPhones or Android phones go together now, right? You just do different things with them. Double Robotics has their iPad version of the telepresence robot. And those things are, I mean, I think that's a very rich tapestry of opportunity, is robotic devices that connect to iPhones and iPads and wireless experiences. I think it's a very interesting area. But I would also say that you have to kind of go beyond, you have to go beyond what's there today and create new needs, new opportunities. In other words, kind of shape the category. So don't just kind of follow the path of others that just seem to be kind of the most, you know, interesting. Because retail is also looking to innovators to come up with ideas to how do you shape the category around robotics. So what's that look like to us, and why should we care? And there's a lot of need analysis that kind of you get stuck into, like, well, why would somebody use something like this? Part of it that we learned at Ugobe, and I've also learned beyond, is you have to create, if you can create a wonderful experience with consumers and your product, and it's endearing and it's addictive, and we used to call it an empathy layer. If you create an empathy layer between your product and the people, you're probably in the right path. You're probably going in the right direction. And it may be out of category for something right now in retail. It doesn't mean you're not going to succeed. It's just a matter of making sure you have a product that people really feel great about. And I love that about Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is a really good validation point. You get to put it out there and see how people respond to it, which is really shaping a lot of retail decisions as well. What's happening on Kickstarter is a barometer of, and I say crowd tilt and other crowdsourced opportunities, or, you know, platforms or interesting avenues. But my point is that the category in robots is still being defined. I mean, in robots itself is being defined. It isn't about Android, you know, or, you know, cyborg-like two-legged robots. Robots could be robotic devices that come to life, like the well, we thought about Toby, which is our little Android video conferencing system no one ever saw. But how do you bring things to life that are really interesting to people, that are robotic in nature? So I think, Andre, as far as the category goes, I think this is a very rich category that retailers they're looking for ideas, and the market, the consumers are looking for what's next. So you know, this whole block and tackle of building a real company, you can succeed. So, you know, to your itch is about really making sure you get the core principles down right, so that you can do what you do best: innovate, build, and really share your product and your ideas with the world, right? And so do that responsibly and to succeed and not to fail. You have to have some core things in place. Again, the methodology we talked about. The two is is hopefully a good guide. Is a good guidepost for companies that are looking for ways to improve and, of course, to succeed in retail. I will say that there are some fundamental things you have to know about. Otherwise, it's going to be a challenge for a company. So I'm very optimistic that I see a lot of really great products and companies coming to market right now, and I'm really, I think this whole hardware world we're in a renaissance phase. We're in this creation phase where now you have the ability to prototype quickly and manufacture in a way that otherwise would be. You can get to manufacturing fast through interesting partnerships now. You can use temporary tooling or aluminum tooling, not steel tooling, to kind of prove out a product Distribution channels are much more efficient than before. Retail opportunities are much more prevalent. And of course, technology devices like embedded sensors and chips and batteries and are all coming down in price. We're now, the cost of a camera to be put into a product is very low, basically thank you to the world of smartphones. So there's really some wonderful opportunities to create cost-effective and really compelling products in hardware. So that's opening up a whole opportunity fabric of creativity that we're seeing right now in the marketplace. And in the retail world, retailers are trying to be innovative themselves. They're trying to figure out where the market's going in the space. How can they, that retailer be positioned to be, forward thinking and to better promote their products in a robot or let's say smart device category. Best Buy's gone through a lot of, they've changed their approach in many different ways, and I know that Target and others are changing some different directions. Fab, the guild groups, the urban daddies, this goes on of all these online. They're giving boutique product companies, hardware companies to get out there and so, but it doesn't mean they necessarily know where things are going. They're just so back to the innovators and to the startup companies. It's really important to help shape that category and of course to manage it correctly.
So just to summarize there, you're saying that innovation is really one of the key roles for a robotics company, that they're shaping what is going to come, that it's something that retailers are actually interested in, but it's up to a robotics company to kind of frame the dialogue. But you're saying at the same time not to get lost in your own process and just building, but to understand how to connect your manufacturing and your retail bookends, as you described it, and how to manage your first couple of years of actual revenue. Most people only think about getting to the stage of getting revenue and I don't know how much people consider getting past that.
Yeah, one of the things that it's not a very sexy area, but it's really important to a company is reverse logistics, customer support. So every time your product fails or people don't like it and it's returned to a retailer and to you, it's a chance for you to learn what's wrong with your product. So think about Apple stores, for example. Apple is probably the best reverse logistics company in the world. They are getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of people coming back with iPhones and iPads to the Genius Bar and trying to figure out how to solve the problem. And that feedback loop is an amazing feedback loop. And so Apple is iterating all the time based on the knowledge they collect. You're not going to get that from Android. I mean, not that I'm against Android, but you're not going to get that same reverse logistics knowledge path for an Android phone because they don't have their own retail stores to collect the data, to then take the notes, to then send back to the manufacturer and say, these are the things that are trending in the wrong direction, let's solve it. They get it kind of, it's a kind of broken, it's like a game of telephone. It's like a broken message that gets back to the manufacturer at some point. So for you as a hardware company, it's really important to be connected to the consumer. So one of the things I recommend in my 7 pillars of, let's say, success for your company is to build a customer support community. So a community that you're continually supporting your company as, but also the community is supporting itself. Because you really want to hear what's happening. You want to know that, the gears are breaking or the motors are dying because of certain challenges, or the sensors are always going bad because for whatever reason, electrical glitch of some sort. And you might have designed your product perfectly, but it goes into manufacturing and things happen. You know, on a production line, you have a vendor who doesn't deliver the right specs every single time on a specific chip. We had camera challenges on Pleo because we had a vendor, a chip technology that had some faulty firmware issues, and they didn't even know it. So we had to basically troubleshoot the firmware ourselves and solve the issue on this chip. And then we reported it, published it back to the company. But we didn't know about that until some of the consumers got back to us on our Pleo world and said, "Hey, you know what? Your cameras are blacking out every couple of minutes. What's going on with it?" And it was this kind of random thing. We couldn't see it until it was out there in mass. So look at your market as a big kind of R&D opportunity. You know, you're going to be discovering iterations and challenges that you should be happy to hear about, and then synthesize those. So one of the things I also say then is to iterate fast, but adjust your design carefully. So you don't want to go back to manufacturing every single month and say, make these changes on molds. Let's say your big tooling molds. It's too expensive. But if you can make changes on firmware, yes, make them. If you can make small adjustments on a manufacturing line or with vendors and suppliers, then please, yeah, great to do that. Realize that manufacturers in China are only so patient. They don't want you calling them every single day and saying, make these adjustments. So we kind of we wore out our manufacturing partner a few times because we were very on top of making adjustments and changes, and we learned how to get kind of a rhythm and a pace going with improvements. But we got, but the point at this is make sure your customer community is part of your support, and to embrace it and to really learn from your customers. And then take that learning into your product engineering and eventually your innovation, things you need to do for the next product cycle. But you know, there's a reason why good products work really well, because those companies learn to talk to the customer and learn to synthesize things in a way that works, right? So it's just a really important but non-sexy thing. Like any bots, we had challenges with, of course, the robot QB, and you know, it was really not it was, without getting into the details, we had challenges. We had to support those fixes in the field, but also back at the manufacturing facility. And we got really smart about what were some of the issues and how to solve them. And that directed a lot of the product engineering that took place at Anybots. You know, I would imagine the same thing happens with Double Robotics. They're gonna scale and sell lots of the robots, and they're gonna start to learn about some of the issues that customers have, the challenges with, you know, encrypted Wi-Fi or secure networks, and you know, challenges and all that kind of stuff. So it's fun. It's a fun process, but you have to be aware of it. And again, I say just embrace it. Make it part of the fabric of your company.
You've raised a great many areas, and I think you've probably answered this question several times over, but do you have any words of advice for robot startups?
Do it. I'd say it's the best time to start a company in the hardware business. Robot, obviously. I think it's just, you have to be, you know, eyes wide open. You know, just know what you're getting yourself into, and know the challenges, and then, you know. But I think it's really a great opportunity. There's going to be a lot of, you know, there was a discussion I had with somebody just recently that, you know, software world is always going to be evolving, but software is only a reflection of hardware. So hardware and software obviously have to fit together. And right now, there's we need innovation in hardware. We need other devices that can use software in new intelligent ways that are around us on our desktop, in our car, on our person, or whatever. We need more devices that we can improve our experience around the world, but just, I would not just say make us healthier and make us smarter and make us more connected, but also just entertain us. So there's a lot of opportunity in creating a robot company right now, and I'm encouraged by it, and it's needed. So, and I'm hoping that the software world will begin to understand the power of connected devices more and more, and participate. Not just provide us with new software applications, but also software companies should be, I believe, should be part of the evolution of these hardware companies, helping them figure out how to make the product more interesting, more compelling, open up relationships for them in different areas. So I think it's not just we're on this island of hardware company that we're building these devices. It's about how do we get the rest of the ecosystem, the software world, in together with hardware companies, and it really has a nice hand in glove relationship. And I think there has been more outreach in that area. But I'm encouraged by it. I recommend you take a look at the To Your Itch. Read through the principles. I mean, these are hard fought, learned lessons that, Ugobe, as Caleb and I said, the invention was not Pleo, the invention was Ugobe. So that was inventing Ugobe and making it work in the way it did was amazing. I mean, it was an amazing machine. And when you get the machine going, your company going, you'll see that. It's just an amazing process. And if it works well, it's just the most amazing. The product is the company, essentially. So the To Your Itch is about creating that product, which is your company.